Well, good evening, America. It is 7 p.m. It is Tuesday, September 8th, and this is Queer News Tonight, the world's first live LGBTQ daily evening news. It is time to queer up the news.
So watch as we bring you these and other stories from the LGBTQ headlines. First, a Texas Assistant Attorney General fired after violent, homophobic, and racist tweets. And an Australian ice hockey player sues league over vilification of homosexuals.
Richard Grinnell snaps at reporter for bringing up decriminalizing homosexuality. And Gretchen Wieners finally gets the justice she deserves as Pillsbury unveils Mean Girls Toaster Strudel.
Right, and later on this week, on It's Happening Out Wednesday night at 8 p.m., we're going to discuss Bella Thorne's OnlyFans scandal and what it means for sex workers everywhere. Then on Gay Town Hall Thursday at 8 p.m., our diverse cast from all around the LGBTQ community discusses how they have learned that literally nothing that Donald Trump says matters to his supporters and how that will impact all of us in the LGBTQ community. So good evening, America. It is 7 p.m. Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. It is time to queer up the news. We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your stories we are going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight. Tonight on the world's first live daily queer evening news show.
Tonight's news about the gay community and the news from an LGBTQ perspective. Are our gay stories important to you? In headlines, politics, entertainment, gay culture, travel, religion, and more. Reported by respected anchors.
Out of the closet and into the headlines on Q News Tonight. Well, thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. We are live as an unedited LGBTQ news show, so anything can happen. This evening, we are going to bring you the news of and a perspective from the LGBTQ community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and these are my co-anchors, Aaron Darr and David Hopkins. So let's queer up the news. Tonight we begin with queer headlines. The LGBTQ community in America is diverse, while the LGBTQ community around the world is vast. And we bring you the bullet points of queer news for today, Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. We begin in queering up Vote 2020 in reporting a military meltdown. Mayor Pete slams Donald Trump and Trump tweets for Jennifer Griffin to be fired. Watch this.
John Roberts was working his sources at the White House. I was working my sources, and we teamed up, as you saw at the top of Brett Baer's show, and our reports were straight down the middle, as always. You know, Neil, Deep Throat was an unnamed source. It didn't make what he said untrue. My sources are not anonymous to me, and I doubt they are anonymous to the president.
It has been a brutal weekend for Donald Trump, as the Atlantic magazine, as well as other news outlets, have sources that say Donald Trump called military service men and women who died for this country losers, and also all of the military suckers for signing up to go to war. Trump also spared time to condemn military leaders as part of the military-industrial complex, whereas in the past he offered nothing but routine praise. Lashing out at Fox News over its reporting of this, he called for Jennifer Griffin to be fired, saying that she never called him for comment. If this all wasn't bad enough, former Democratic nominee for president and retired military man himself, Mayor Pete, weighed in, saying that he had been disrespecting the military since the Vietnam War, where Trump dodged the draft and had another person go instead for him.
I was actually going to follow up and say the same exact thing. Some people call him President Trump. I'm now referring to him as President Bone Spurs, a draft dodger. That's what he is. You know, Maya Angelou has always said that when someone shows you who they are, believe them, and believe them the first time. We've had 4 years of President Trump in which he's shown us that he's gone on record, even criticizing late Senator John McCain, calling him a loser as well. And this is indicative of his behavior, and I do believe this. And I think it's very unfortunate for the brave men and women who continue to serve our country when the President of the United States does not even support them.
Yeah, I loved it overnight when military leaders spoke out against him. So, of course, he went on a Twitter tirade. He doesn't care about anybody in this country except for himself and whoever his Twitter followers are, which now it turns out are mostly fake bots.
Jennifer Griffin was very clear on Fox News that her sources were unimpeachable. Full stop there. The one disappointing thing in this story that'll be interesting, we're 56 days away from the election now. There are two people that are waiting to be heard on this story. And one is a former chief of staff in the White House, and the other is a former Secretary of Defense, and maybe a Secretary of State. If they do not come out and comment in the next 56 days to protect the president, they are forever, forever stained with the same shame if President Trump said these comments.
Next, we queer up the USA. Richard Grinnell snaps at reporter for bringing up decriminalizing homosexuality. Watch this.
Ambassador Grinnell, clearly you were effective here as the special envoy to these talks between Serbia and Kosovo, but I wanted to ask you about another initiative you led. Last year you kicked off the Trump administration push to decriminalize homosexuality.
Yeah, I'm going to just talk about Kosovo and Serbia. I don't know if you can find it on a map, but this is atrocious. I have to tell you guys, you might be too young to understand what this issue is about. Maybe the older journalists should step up and say, this is a big deal. This is a big issue.
Richard Grinnell, the former acting director of national intelligence and who's now the face of Trump's campaign, the Trump campaign's LGBTQ outreach, rebuked a reporter Friday at the White House briefing for asking him about the global initiative he led to decriminalize homosexuality. He instead insisted questions should be focused on the deal the press release was about, going on a tirade, "I'm going to just talk about Kosovo and Serbia. I don't know if you can find it on a map, but this is atrocious. I have to tell you guys, you might be too young to understand what this issue is about. Maybe the older journalists should step in and say, this is a big deal. This is a big issue." The White House has not responded to requests for comment on the global initiative.
I just posted today in Facebook the reference for Uncle Tom coming out of the Civil War. And today I reframed it by saying, well, it's Uncle Grinnell. Because he is doing the exact same thing to the LGBTQ community, which is having a speech in the RNC and never even mentioning a single thing as the LGBT senior advisor for the Trump campaign, never acknowledging that he was gay or anything that he thought the president should do for the LGBT community in the next 4 years. You are literally an Uncle Grinnell.
Yes, I have to second that. No, what's really shameful is that Richard Grinnell, even being a member of the Republican Party and being homosexual himself, he really has a responsibility to the LGBTQ community, to his LGBT brothers and sisters, to speak on behalf of the rights of all of us that are all too often trampled on, not just by Republicans, but countless others in America and all over the world, where we see just in America alone, the average life expectancy rate of someone who is transgender is only 35 years old, because most of them meet the same fate. They're either committing suicide or they're being murdered. They're being burned in cars, being beaten, tortured, raped, what have you. It's really a shame because the former ambassador really finds himself in a position of leadership, power, and authority and influence, and he could use that for so much good, but he chooses not to.
I'm not going to say Richard Grinnell's a good person, because he's not, but at the same time, I think the Washington Blade reporter is propagating fake news in this situation. The press event, he tried to take it off of topic, and if you want to see Al react when people take things off topic, make sure to watch It's Happening Out and Gay Town Hall.
Funny. Next we queer up business, and we report, this is a fun story, Gretchen Wieners finally gets the justice that she deserves as Pillsbury unveils Mean Girls Toaster Strudel. Yep. In a marketing ploy that we're surprised took 16 years to do, foodstuffs company Pillsbury has launched a Mean Girls-inspired toaster strudel, and it honestly is our favorite thing of this miserable year. The fetch treat is cream cheese and strawberry flavored, and pink icing is included. I've never done a story like this for News Tonight. There is also a sweepstakes going on to pay homage to the movie claimed inventor of Toaster Strudel's daughter, Gretchen Wieners. 3 grand prize winners will get a personalized video message from Lacey Chabert, 1 year's worth of Pillsbury Toaster Strudel, and Mean Girls merchandise. Do we have any comments about this?
Oh my God, I'm so excited. It's Tuesday, but tomorrow I may wear pink.
You say Pillsbury, I say that was my nickname in college. Okay. So from Mean Girls to the Mean Men of Facebook, join us as we queer up Vote 2020. Facebook is paying users to deactivate accounts ahead of the November election. Watch this.
Determining what is and isn't a message that people can see.
So as our viewers just saw in that video, Facebook is paying some users to deactivate their accounts up to 6 weeks before the 2020 presidential election, according to screenshots from the Washington Post reporter Elizabeth Dwoskin. The effort is part of a new research project Facebook announced in an August 31st blog post to better understand the impact of Facebook and Instagram on key political attitudes and behaviors during the U.S. 2020 elections. The screenshot shows survey answers to options that include $10 per week, $15 per week, and $20 per week.
Next, we queer up the world. U.S. Marine who strangled a trans woman to death while serving the Philippines gets presidential pardon. Joseph Scott Pemberton, who had been stationed in the country for a training exercise, was serving 10 years for the October 2014 killing of Filipina trans woman Jennifer Laude. Pemberton, who had been seeking early release on grounds of good behavior, is now expected to walk free thanks to a pardon from Rodrigo Duterte, who has a lengthy anti-LGBTQ record.
Next, we queer up entertainment. RuPaul admits Drag Race is completely manipulated, says the legendary Lady Bunny. The legendary queen and Wingstop founder began her career in the 1980s after moving from Atlanta to New York with her friend RuPaul. She said in an interview that RuPaul, quote, is an old friend. I'm glad he has success with the show, but it would never be my cup of tea, especially since people are edited to misrepresent what they say and do. Ru and the producers of the show admit that it's completely manipulated. They admit that in the interviews, and admit that in interviews all the time, they say it is heavily produced. End quote from Lady Bunny. I suppose Lady Bunny doesn't exactly need the fame of Drag Race when she is such a hit herself.
Well, from drag racing to racists in Texas, join us as we queer up the USA. Texas Assistant Attorney General fired after violent homophobic and racist tweets. Nick Moutis, the Assistant Attorney General for Texas, has been fired after a series of racist and homophobic tweets. In tweets dating back as recent as just this week, he targeted the LGBTQ community, writing, "How is it bigoted to say that the LGBTQ community is an abomination? God in the Torah and Jesus in the Testament and the New Testament call it a sin and an abomination. I don't hate them, but cannot condone their behavior." Well, at least now, Mr. Moutis will have more time to reflect on his behavior from the comfort of his home.
Next, we queer up the world. Ugandan minister who pushed for Kill the Gays bill loses seat in primary election. Simon Lokoto was challenged for his Dodoth West County seat, which he's held since 2006, by Batom Ben Koryang, who is also a member of the National Resistance Movement. During his career, Lokoto has held the position of Minister for Industry and Technology and Minister for Ethics, and it's the later role for which the Ugandan politician became infamous.
Next, we queer up religion in reporting a Savannah church is the first in the United States to leave the Methodist denomination over LGBTQ issues. The new Asbury Memorial Church is now non-denominational as of September 3rd. The disaffiliation comes after a vote by the congregation back in September of 2019, where 309 members voted in favor of leaving the denomination, widely defeating just 7 members in opposition. The vote came after the Judicial Council of the United Methodist Church decided to uphold the, quote, traditional plan, solidifying the church's ban on same-sex marriage and the ordination of LGBTQ pastors.
Next, we queer up sports. Ice hockey player sues league over vilification of homosexuals. Former CBR Brave winger Jesse Gabriel is suing the Australian Ice Hockey League, claiming he was subjected to homophobic comments, vilification, and violence throughout the 2019 season. Jesse says that these comments came from both players and coaches. When approached an AIHL board member to register his complaints, they refused to register him for the 2020 season, despite him having already agreed to terms with Melbourne Ice.
Next, we queer up Vote 2020. Voting season begins as North Carolina mails out first ballots. The 2020 general election has begun, with North Carolina becoming the first state to start mailing out absentee ballots on Friday, 2 months before Election Day. Other states will begin doing the same over the next few weeks in an election that's expected to break all records in the number of ballots cast early and by mail. Minnesota will be the first state to offer early in-person voting starting September 18th, with many states following not long afterwards.
Next, we queer up health. Congressional Democrats introduced bill to revise FDA blood donation rules for LGBTQ people. Congresswoman Val Demings and Congressman Mike Quigley introduced the bill named the Science and Blood Donation Act of 2020, which would require the FDA to revise its guidance on reducing the risk of HIV transmission by blood and blood products by basing it on the window period, which is referring to the time that it takes for HIV antibodies to show up in the blood of the most up-to-date testing and an individual risk-based analysis. That change was made in response to the COVID-19 pandemic due to concerns that categorically eliminating gay and bisexual men who had survived the virus from the pool of eligible donors would lead to reductions in antibody-rich plasma needed to fight this disease.
Tonight, let's catch up on all the news surrounding COVID-19 with our segment called Quarantine Quickies. The first story tonight is our daily reporting of coronavirus facts, especially important to our LGBTQ community. First, we report on coronavirus case numbers. Based on standard acceptance of the LGBTQ community, the world's LGBTQ COVID-19 cases now stand at 1,934,724, while America's LGBTQ community COVID-19 cases stand at a staggering 454,685. We remind you that America is ground zero of this pandemic. The USA continues to be only 4.4% of the world's population, and today America is 23.5% of the world's cases. Next, we report on coronavirus case deaths. The world's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at 62,941, while America's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at 13,558. The USA is 21.5% of all of the world's deaths.
Our first story in Quarantine Quickies. Largest gay circuit party of the year is canceled by COVID-19 following Labor Day parties. Watch this.
This past weekend, dozens packed a patio outside Atlanta Bar with no masks or social distancing in sight. And more are scheduled over the next few days.
So there's no way that you can tell me that you guys were social distant. The venues were packed. There was not a mask in sight.
Terrence Stewart is chair of Atlanta Black Pride, scheduled this weekend. While the LGBTQ festival is all virtual this year, some party promoters are hosting in-person events with the organization's blessing if they agree to limit capacity and adhere to CDC guidelines.
Georgia health experts are concerned Labor Day weekend could have ushered in a new wave of COVID-19 infections just as the state's cases has started to slow down. Despite the warning, large parties happened over Labor Day in the metro Atlanta area. This past weekend, scenes from a packed bar provided a preview of what we can expect. Video posted on social media showed dozens of people shoulder to shoulder, shirtless, and not wearing masks on the patio outside of the Heretic, which is an Atlanta bar. On the heels of this news, the nation's largest gay circuit party, White Party Palm Springs in Southern California, has been officially postponed until April of 2021. After canceling the April 2020 event, White Party was originally rescheduled for October of this year, but founder Jeffrey Sanker said the continuing threat of COVID-19 made it impossible for it to happen this year.
As somebody who runs charity parties, this is a very difficult time. I personally have an event scheduled for November, which we may have to reschedule to March too. We're still thinking on that. People need to be responsible. These event promoters were not, and it's going to affect everybody.
We're all speaking in secretive language. Everyone in the LGBTQ community knows what's going on in our social settings. We all know. We understand the dog whistle of selling a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in our bar. We understand what's going on. Really, the only question is not seeing those pictures at the Heretic, but whether or not we can publicly admit this is what we want. We haven't gotten there, but we're talking in secretive language that says we've accepted it.
You see, we have to put people over profit. We have to put people over parties. You know, whether you're gay, straight, what have you, we all owe and we all have a personal responsibility that we share in caring for one another and wearing a mask and adhering to best practices and social distancing. So these parties, as they occur, especially within the LGBTQ community, find them to be quite outrageous. I think it's very offensive, and I'm glad to see that Palm Springs, for example, is taking the steps necessary to reschedule.
Quarantine quickies. COVID-19 raging, flu is here. Flu shot is critical for LGBTQ community. While a flu shot will not help someone to prevent obtaining COVID-19, there's an increased awareness and danger this year with COVID-19 raging all across America. Studies show that healthy people have a very high survival rate for COVID-19, but that any pre-existing condition that may have weakened the body, such as a nasty bout of the flu, may be cause for concern if you were to get COVID-19 later. It is why it cannot be stressed enough that we all need to be safe and get our flu shots this year.
Next, we are going to queer up our segment called Good News. After we finish our headlines, we want to report on something that made us smile today in Good News.
So let's smile, let's queer up good news. A black jogger detained in Florida for fitting the suspect description has been offered a job in the sheriff's department. There have been a lot of issues with police lately, so when you hear that a black man was stopped based off of a description, you may start to get a little nervous about what comes next. But instead of something awful, something fantastic happened instead, and it is indeed very good news. So watch this.
Can I see your ID? Yeah. You literally, they said white tank top, black shorts. And they said that you had a beard, all right? So I'm not saying it's you.
Of course, it was pretty scary. I didn't know what was going on at first when he approached me.
Deputies stopping 28-year-old Joseph Griffin during his afternoon jog, searching for a lawn equipment thief who had a similar description according to a witness.
African-American male with a white tank top and black shorts.
Griffin then taking to Facebook Live as the deputy puts him in handcuffs.
I figured if there were eyes on, then nothing bad would have happened.
You're not under arrest. I'm detaining you right now because you fit the description, okay?
Another deputy holding Griffin's phone so it can still record.
I'm gonna take care of you. Relax. I got you, buddy.
The father of two says it took about 15 minutes before deputies cleared and released him. He says they also apologized for the inconvenience.
I just want to say thank you. Not everybody is that understanding and respectful.
This is one of the best examples that I have seen as far as civilians being compliant and officers actually trying to assure the civilians that we're not out to get you.
The way we stopped Mr. Griffin is the way we would stop a white guy, a black guy, Hispanic guy, or a purple guy, and there's body camera video out there.
Sheriff Mike Chitwood says this stop is a teachable moment and invited Griffin, a former military officer, to attend an implicit bias training class to share his experience with law enforcement.
Nobody is saying anybody did anything wrong, but there is a way here to look at life from both sides of the coin.
And thank you for Officer Estrada here, who told me from the get-go, hey, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. But I will say, if you remain calm, at least 85% of the time, the situation will go your way. Yes, the officer has authority, but in the end, you have control.
Very good news. Happening Out Television Network is broadcasting on our brand new set in partnership with the Sunshine Cathedral. This is the world's largest queer church in Fort Lauderdale, Wilton Manors, Florida. And we joke, this is the gayest place on planet Earth. Our support of their Sunday celebration is the largest LGBTQ religious broadcast in the world, every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, and it's live. We encourage you to tune in. Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church. Watch this.
I'm Phil McChesney, chair of the Sunshine Cathedral Foundation, and the Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
We'd also like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living here in Fort Lauderdale, for making this set in this amazing queer church campus possible.
Well, tonight is part 26, can you believe it? Part 26 of Q's Q&A on coronavirus and the LGBTQ community this September 8th. This special segment is designed to be unique in America to answer your questions about coronavirus for the LGBTQ community during this pandemic.
Every Tuesday, we have an American pioneer in AIDS HIV medical treatment. With us is Dr. Howard Grossman, specialist in internal medicine with an emphasis on HIV. He was the executive director of the American Academy of HIV Medicine and has become nationally recognized as an educator on HIV issues and as an advocate for LGBTQ civil rights and the rights of our community.
And he has become the medical expert during pandemic for Queer News Tonight. Welcome, Dr. Grossman. And before we get into viewer questions, it's another big week, of course, for science and medicine. Tonight we have you remotely, America. I clue you in, LGBT America. Dr. Grossman, of course, is gay, and I understand because of it's Labor Day, you've gone down to some big circuit party down in Key West, where you're coming from.
Oh, yeah, right.
No, it's a joke.
Yeah, I'm in Key West. One of the other gayest places on planet Earth.
Yes, that's absolutely.
But actually, just taking a break, but actually doing some work down here, doing a coronavirus testing event on Wednesday.
Oh, great!
With my
all right. Well,
yeah.
Tell us before we get into viewer questions. You've watched the week. You've watched the White House again. You watched Labor Day weekend. What's on your mind before we get into viewer questions?
Well, it is concerning that Labor Day weekend presented an opportunity again for large super spreader events. We saw film from all over the country, straight and gay, and we could talk more about the gay issues. But it's clear that people are getting burned out on isolating. They are getting attending more and more of these things. I think the big news this week was the thousands of infections that are showing up on college campuses and how colleges and universities are struggling desperately to try to figure out what to do in these situations, going as far as expelling people who violate the rules. I think that was big news this week. but we are seeing increases in places like Iowa, in Illinois, in places with these big universities that won't stay in the university, unfortunately. They're going to spread to the local towns, and there's a real town-gown conflict that is getting set up here.
You know, Dr. Grossman, you just saw the note or the story that we just did on the Heretic in Atlanta, and the decision of the White Party Palm Springs, the biggest event of its kind in the United States, if not even the entire world. What we watched at the Heretic was a choice of no. They just chose no, I'm not going to. When you get to that point, like what we watched at the Heretic, what can the medical community do? What can LGBT media do other than to point out truth and good, solid recommendation? But if large portions of our community just say no, we're not going to, what's next for us?
Well, I think you're right. We do need to continue to try to educate and try to get the right information out there. Truthfully, I think there's something going on in Atlanta. Now, the film that we saw was a little bit confusing because it talked about Atlanta Black Pride, which is one of the biggest events that happens in or anywhere in the country, and it showed pictures of white guys at the Heretic. So, clearly, Black Pride is trying to do the right thing, it seemed to me, in that clip. But what you saw there was a feeling. And I will tell you that recently some friends of mine were at a gay hotel here in Key West. And there were a bunch of guys from Atlanta who were insisting that they had herd immunity because they all were partying together and they were sure that they'd all had coronavirus. So clearly there is this myth on the ground in Atlanta that promotes the kind of behavior that you saw in that video from that bar. I lay a lot of this at the feet of the governor of Georgia, who has been a denialist from the beginning.
And say his name, Governor Kemp.
Brian Kemp, who has failed to enforce mask rules, he tried to actually sue the mayor of Atlanta, who was wonderful, when she tried to have an enforced mask rule. So, like I said, it seemed to me that Atlanta Black Pride was making some real effort to protect people. But I think what we're seeing in the white gay community in Atlanta is really scary. I salute Jeffrey Sanker for canceling Palm Springs because it is a huge event. There's a huge amount of money involved, and people love the event and come from all over the world. I think it takes real courage to say no. And, I think we're seeing this in cities that were hugely affected. In New York today, the LGBTQ Center in New York announced that it will not be opening for the rest of 2020 because of fears of coronavirus. And they're in a city that was more affected than anywhere else in the United States. People know what this is about. And apparently they did a survey, and 70% of their respondents said that they really weren't comfortable coming back to a group setting.
Speaking of the potential of a super spreader event, like a big circuit party, David's going to kick off, I believe, Aaron's going to kick off some viewer questions. Aaron, let's start with you.
Well, as always, Dr. Grossman, thank you so much again for being with us. Our first viewer question this evening, I just want you to elaborate, I guess, on some of the things that you previously spoke of. But our first viewer question is, what do you think of all of these major circuit parties that happened this past weekend and how that's going to affect the numbers associated with coronavirus?
Well, look, I mean, any of these events that include lots of people are going to serve as super spreader events. We heard this last week about a wedding in Maine where there were no masks and there were just 100 or so people that has since spread coronavirus all over the state of Maine and killed at least 3 people who were not even at the event. So the rates in Maine suddenly went up from this one wedding that people then went and spread the virus around. We're seeing the stories of the college campuses. So, we cannot hold these events safely. And Georgia has a rule of no more than 50 people at an event. Well, there were sure more than 50 people standing outside of that bar, or at that bar that we showed in the video. So they're breaking the law. And I mean, these are our gay compatriots. I think there's just a huge amount of misinformation. Like I said, this idea that there's herd immunity because you've been partying together. Herd immunity means 70 to 80% of the general population being infected.
Which would mean, by the way, America, just to do a quick calculation, because sometimes we get lost in the numbers, to accomplish the general acceptance of herd immunity in our community, in our state where we're broadcasting from, in Florida, in Key West where Dr. Grossman is in the United States. Let's do it on a national level. Herd immunity at what he just challenged at 80% would take approximately, we have about 7 million Americans infected, would take 260 million Americans infected. Herd immunity is not happening. It is not happening. It's not happening.
Right,
so
and over 2 million deaths.
And 2 million deaths, right. It's just not happening.
Right.
David, we have another viewer question we want to zero in.
Yes, you had mentioned the colleges earlier, and a viewer has asked, do you believe distance learning is required, or do we just need better safety procedures in school?
I think a lot of it depends on the infection rate and where you are. I think we need very clear, kids want to go back to college. They want the college experience, and part of that is interacting with other people. I think if there are good safety measures in place, like frequent testing and everybody being required to wear masks and not having groups of people in parties, that it is possible to have learning in person. I'm not sure that spending 2 hours in a lecture with 300 people in the room is necessarily the best thing. But I think there are ways to do this, whether it's half the people, and then some days and half other days, and a combination of distance learning. I think the problem at all of these big universities has been kids who are partying and without masks, who are just avoiding the rules. I know at my college, Haverford College in Pennsylvania, it's a small school. It's only 1,200 people, but they're back in school. A combination of tele-education and in-person education. There are certainly people who cannot come from other countries who are doing everything over the internet. But they've closed the campus, so all the places where people from outside come in to play tennis or to walk the nature trail closed off to the outside. So by doing that, they really are isolating this small community of 1,200 people plus the faculty as much as possible. So I think there are creative solutions out there that people are using.
So it's almost like the NBA bubble.
And it also depends on what the infection rate is in your community. If you have a very low infection rate, going back to school may be okay. New York is opening its schools because they've had less than 1% new infections for the last 30 days. No place else in this country is hitting that kind of target as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Dr. Grossman, we had a question outside of the COVID parameters this week that we wanted to include, and Aaron has that.
Yeah, and I promise it wasn't written by me. It might sound like it was, but it wasn't. It wasn't me. So a viewer asked, I'm trying to lower my blood sugar, and carbs confuse me. Yeah, me too, girl. So what is a good and what is a bad carb?
Okay, so when we're talking, carbohydrates are important because they're a big source of energy. When we're talking about good carbs versus bad carbs, the simplest way to think about it is good carbs are things like whole grains, quinoa, brown rice, things like that. Vegetables,
things I've never had
fruits.
before.
And fiber. Those are all good carbs. Bad carbs are refined sugars, processed foods. Things that can raise your blood sugar very quickly. So all ice cream and soda pop, and I'm from the Northeast. I must have spent too much time in the South if I said soda pop. things that deal with a lot of processed raw sugars. Okay, so you have good carbs and bad carbs. So eating fruits and vegetables, those are good. And whole grains. Not eating stuff that comes out of a box is a really easy way to control some of that. And not eating processed foods.
I tell you.
I'm in tears. Dr. Grossman, I'm kind of curious, if you were just going to look into your medical crystal ball, which I'm sure you brought down to Key West with you, how do you think Aaron does on his carbs, good carbs, bad carbs combination? What would your guess be?
I'm guessing that Aaron, being young, he's got a lot of bad carbs with high glycemic index. Yeah. So that glycemic index is when they talk about that, is how quickly the sugars are absorbed. So, complex carbohydrates that have, that take a while to break down, that have long chains of sugars, tend to be absorbed more slowly and not raise your blood sugar quite as quickly. So they talk about the glycemic index. We also talk about the glycemic impact. And so I like to bring up something like watermelon, for example, has a high glycemic index, but very low carbs. So it turns out, because it's mostly water, it turns out not to have a lot of impact.
Yeah, so watermelon is okay.
You need to think about these. Watermelon's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And before we move
if
on,
watermelon comes in the form of like Starburst or Skittles, is that okay?
Ice cream. I was going to, we already know what his answer is going to be, so don't fish for the slam that you're going to get. Aaron, do you have any rebuttal here to the good carb, bad carb recommendation that you've gotten from our medical expert? Any rebuttal?
I was at a restaurant yesterday with my partner, and I ordered what is basically a cheeseburger inside of a wrap. And because it said wrap, I thought I was eating healthy. But when I got it, I saw that there was tomato and there was lettuce, so there's your vegetables you're referring to.
You're all good.
But immediately on the outside of it, I saw it and I thought, these are my favorite food groups: fat, grease, cheese, red meat. It's interesting watching the screen right now with the four of us. I'm not sure if I'm on Q News tonight or if this is an episode of Dr. Phil and Intervention. I'm just preparing, if COVID continues on in the manner that it does, I'm going to go from COVID-19 to COVID-40, and next year you'll see me on TLC's My 600-Pound Life.
In other news, Weight Watchers, if you'd like to sponsor a segment.
I'm counting my points, Oprah.
Wait, every single word that just came out of his mouth was truth. Dr. Grossman, we want to...
You're young, Aaron.
Yeah.
I know.
No, he's not that young. Not that young.
I'm still in my 20s. Leave me alone.
All right, Dr. Grossman, before we finish our Q&A, I want to give you an opportunity. Anything else that you want to tell us about the week, or anything that you're feeling is going on, or any final thoughts? Yeah, your favorite
Is it
soda
Dr.
pop.
Pepper? Just guessing.
Right. Any final thoughts?
I mean, food is complicated. Food is complicated.
Oh God, my longest relationship, I'll tell you.
Many of us have weight concerns, and eating healthy is a challenge. You can enjoy good things, and really, Aaron, even all the junk you enjoy, if you eat it in limited quantities, it ain't gonna kill you.
Yeah,
it's really
there's
not
the
only
problem.
Don't eat both pizzas.
That impact, it's quantities. Yes, I mean two slices of pizza is a good meal.
So what I heard was order a thin crust.
Is it natural, Dr. Grossman, to eat out fast food 12 to 14 times a week? Is that normal?
No, that's not.
A viewer just wrote in.
In this country, it is.
In this country, all right.
One thing I tell people is, there are studies that show that eating fast food, especially certain fast foods, make you want more. Whereas if you go for good quality, you feel full. So if you want that hamburger, Aaron, go get it. But make sure
I did. I had Burger King earlier.
Right, and then you wanted another one. But if you went to some others like Five Guys or BurgerFi that use high quality meat, you would be full for a week. And that's the big thing. So if you're going to indulge, go and get the best. Don't have that processed chocolate bar. Go and get some artisanal chocolate that's made more pure, and you'll be satisfied.
Dr. Grossman, you'll be very happy to note that we've been able to get you to speak long enough that our intervention team has just arrived.
Perfect. I've been waiting.
Well, America, we have done this for 26 weeks. This is officially a half a year that we have done this every single week. This is the first time that Dr. Grossman has done it remotely. Something about some medical blah, 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 blah. He's doing it in Key West. I still highly suspect a big social party or one of those great guest house. No, I'm only kidding. But that is part 26 of Q's Q&A of coronavirus and the LGBTQ community. We come to you every Tuesday night trying to bring you viewer questions and the most important medical advice to try to get to the truth of the nonsense that we heard right from the very beginning. We've learned a lot in 26 weeks, for sure. And that is because of our medical expert, Dr. Howard Grossman, here from Midway Specialty Care Center, nationally renowned in HIV medicine and practices right here in Wilton Manors. As we said, the gayest place on planet Earth, with the possible exception of where he is sitting tonight in Key West.
We also have a practice down here.
Yes, exactly. Midway also has a location in Key West. So as always, thank you, Dr. Grossman, for being with us tonight. We look forward to seeing you back, hopefully in person sometime soon, maybe next Tuesday.
Thank you all.
All right.
Next Tuesday.
All right, we're going to end tonight's broadcast with the big finish. These are short story mentions of LGBTQ news and news with a gay perspective. So here we go. First on Queer News tonight's The Big Finish. Well, several boats sink during a Texas parade for Trump.
It's interesting looking at the photos of this because I didn't know that just looking at this, that one, this was a thing. But two, I thought that shit was supposed to float. I didn't know that it could sink to the very bottom. Just saying. Thoughts and prayers, guys.
Thoughts and prayers.
Hope you have a good insurance policy.
Speaking of, I wonder if their insurance covers act of God. Damn, they're stupid. Can I say that in a church?
Yeah. It's a perplexing thing here. A bigger boat caused smaller boats to sink because they were following in its wake. Yep. That's on brand with the Trump Republican Party.
Look at that blue wave.
Yeah. The big finish. Michelle Obama gives, wait, am I reading this right? Dating advice? What did she say? Wait, you can't Tinder your way into a long-term relationship.
I don't even know really what to say to this other than I just love the Obamas. and I hope everyone finds love and a vaccine.
Speaking of, long-term relationships can start anywhere. Tinder, Grindr, truck stop bathrooms.
My 600-pound life.
No, and no. Didn't somebody tell Mrs. Obama to get the message? It's 2020. The world's ending this year. YOLO, America, YOLO.
Al saying YOLO was the best part of that.
The big finish. It's the 25th anniversary of one of the great movies in drag, To Wong Foo. Its anniversary is today, and yes, there's still Mrs. or Miss Rachel Tension.
And yet it might be 2020, yet I'm still wondering, why are you crying, little Latin boy in drag?
Speaking of little Latin boy in drag, one of my favorite moments in life was when I was working at Disney and John Leguizamo stayed at the resort I was staying at and signed my copy of To Wong Foo, and I'm totally sending him this clip because he's amazing.
And I look at both of you and think, oh, you're just tired little Latin boys in a dress. Here's a fun fact for you, however, about To Wong Foo. There was actually a professional golfer named Chichi Rodriguez. Do you remember this? I bet y'all don't. Aaron was barely alive when this movie came out. And Chichi sued for the use in this film, and he won the lawsuit. He got paid for the use of that name.
I'm going to strip him of his princess points.
Exactly, that's right. Some men just have no taste in anything. And long-time involvement in drag, To Wong Foo really changed everything, because when you got Patrick Swayze in a dress, I remember in 1995 how many minds it changed about drag as an art form, simply because This beautiful, masculine, straight man said, what's the big deal?
And Wesley Snipes Blade as Noxzema Jackson, Jesse's daughter.
Yeah. The big finish. How Trump's billion-dollar campaign, it's lost its cash advantage to Biden?
Well, I don't think it's only just lost its cash advantage. I think it's losing its ground game in battleground states. I'm so excited to see the polls that we're seeing all over the country in states like Pennsylvania, right here in Florida, even in Georgia and Texas, and of course North Carolina. So I think it's very important that we all just remember that money can buy elections, but at the end of the day, your voice, your vote, that's the most important aspect of any election. So vote November 3rd.
Yeah, and shh, it's a secret. Trump is broke and terrible with money.
Yes, and he's going to declare bankruptcy again.
And go to jail.
All right, let's try to unpack this. Now, it's a little complicated, so stay with me, because I'm going to try to do some of the Republican math that has become so famous over the last 5 years. We now know that the going rate of paying off a pool boy is approximately $1 million per Jerry Falwell Jr., and that paying off a porn star goes for approximately $130,000, according to Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who is now being advanced more than $2 million for his book on his former employer. The math doesn't seem to add up. So here's what I think happened. Trump had to pay off 100 pool boys, 6,923 porn stars, and then spent the remaining $10,000 at McDonald's.
I don't know if that makes him or Melania more insatiable.
Did someone say McDonald's?
The big finish. Aaron Carter. This is the weirdest story of the day for me. Aaron Carter makes porn debut months after his fiancée had already released content. He went on to porn on Friday.
I don't even know what to say to this other than, from a very early age, Aaron Carter and I are about the same age, and I'd always have people sing Aaron, oh Aaron, to me, and it's such a shame.
They'd sing what?
Aaron, oh Aaron, and it's really such a shame to me looking at him, because I remind myself why you should never get a tattoo from the neck above.
Yeah, Aaron just wants candy, and I don't mean Carter. One of my favorite bisexual music stars, and I don't really care about his music or his career, but his OnlyFans is pretty good.
His OnlyFans, by the way, is fishing for the LGBTQ community.
He's bisexual.
He says he's bisexual. Okay, let's believe that for a moment. But it's interesting to me, all the money he's fishing for is in the LGBTQ community. Kids, look at that boy's picture. Drugs are a hell of a drug. Look at that picture. Also, I have to tell you, today, because of this story, I went in to search some of the pictures on Aaron Carter, because I'm no interest at all, even though I'm LGBT. But the boy does kind of qualify in all of the most important ways. The big finish. Marsha P. Johnson, Janelle Monáe, and Beyonce are going to become real-life superheroes in a new Wonder Woman book.
I think it's so important, especially as we talk about the history of the LGBTQ community, that the white privilege that we often see, especially from white gay men, that it was Marsha P. Johnson, a black trans woman, that really kicked off the Stonewall and the gay liberation movement. And she's forever a superwoman to me.
And to me, this is super awesome, because Wonder Woman was inspired by the women's suffrage movement, and this brings Wonder Woman back to the roots of strong females who defy convention.
You know, to use those three names in the same sentence, I cannot even possibly imagine 1969 at Stonewall, the first brick gets thrown, and the first person that gets between all of the protesters and the police is a drag queen transsexual named Marsha P. Johnson. I cannot even imagine what her reaction would be in 2020 to be in the same page, in the same breath as Beyonce or Janelle. We don't need a comic book to know these three are fantastic heroes in different ways for our community, but especially Marsha P. Johnson to be spoken of in the same class of this. it's appreciated nonetheless.
Absolutely. And that's today's news for the LGBTQ community on the world's first daily LGBTQ evening news show.
And remember, if it's important to the LGBTQ community, it's important to Queer News Tonight. But you must help us, so click subscribe on YouTube and share this news.
We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines, and this is the only source of live LGBTQ news in the entire world. Your community needs your support.
You are not alone. We will get through this crisis.
Yes, we will, and we're here with you every step of the way, and this is Queer News Tonight.
So thank you for joining us. I'm Al Ferguson, and on behalf of my co-host partners, David Hopkins, and Aaron's going to be off for a few days because we have the intervention food crew right here, right now. So as soon as we go off,
I was hoping to play Kirstie Alley on a reboot of Cheers. I'm just trying. I'm trying, guys. I'm trying.
In the gay world,
we're going to get him off those cheeseburgers.
Blasphemy.
And the Mean Girls Strudel too. We will see you every night, including tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Good night, America.
Good night.